welcome to the Mini Sculpting Super Show, episode number 9. This week I have a real treat for you. It's an interview with Trey Manor. Now, Trey is one of my favorite sculptors, and he is one of my best friends, so it's a real treat to be able to interview him and share with you guys a lot of the stuff that I get to chat with him about on a regular basis. So, but even for me, there was several things in this interview that I learned that we never really covered. So it's really good. And I just also wanted to say that we talk a little bit about a Kickstarter he was going to run. And while he ended up not doing that specific Kickstarter, he did follow up and do a really cool one, the War Bands of the Cold North. It's already over, but I'll put a link into it so you guys can check out the latest figures he was working on and pick them up when they come out for release. So check out the interview and enjoy. All right. Well, today I have a very special guest on the Mini Sculpting Super Show. I almost screwed up the name there. I haven't done one of these since I came up with the name. This is one of my favorite sculptors. He's also a really good friend. Many people might know him as the Barbarian Master. He's also the founder of Redbox Games. Let's welcome Trey Manor.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to finally get to talk to you about a lot of this stuff. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but be able to share this with everybody else.
Yeah, great.
So I want to start by talking a little bit about how I first met Trey. So I don't remember the exact year, but I believe it was 2005. We didn't meet, but the way I first, so I said Trey is one of my favorite sculptors, and he literally was. Like, we become very good friends, but when I first saw his work, it was just on the Reaper forums. He was working on these dwarf miniatures that he was posting up there and just showing them off, just trying to get some feedback and some recognition for it. And you went by the name Sigil back then, I believe.
I did. Yes, I did.
And what was the material you were using back then? I remember it was something like nobody else was using it. Not that you can't use it, but
yeah. Well, that was Tamiya Quick Type. It was very fast curing 2-part epoxy putty, similar to green stuff or brown stuff. It had very different working properties because it would cure to the full strength within an hour and a half.
Wow.
You had a really, really short window of time to work with it. And at the time, I didn't really know that people were using. When I got the Tamiya, I was looking at Rackham Sculptors originals, which they were sculpting in Fimo, but I had no idea. I'd heard that there was a 2-part epoxy putty, so I started looking at the hobby shops, and one of the guys there pointed this out to me. He was like, maybe this is what it is. And I was like, yeah, I think it is. So I got that and really took a crash course on how to sculpt a figure really, really fast. But I used that in the beginning of my career for quite a while. There were a lot of troubles with mold making with the material because it's very brittle once it cures. And the heat and pressure would cause fractures and such. So I only did, I think I did 6 or 8 figures in Tamiya for Reaper miniatures. I did several more that were never published, mostly because they were really, really rough, real early stuff. Just kind of finding my way and how to compose a figure and sculpt a figure, and making a lot of mistakes and trying to learn from them as best I could. So, but then eventually I found my way back to green stuff and started working with that for quite a while. Yeah. Well,
that green stuff really is, it's hard to find. It was hard to discover even at that point, like that you could, that was what people were using. It wasn't specifically a secret, but there just weren't people regularly talking about it. I just ended up finding out about it from a random source who happened to be familiar with Games Workshop folks and whatnot. But the key there, folks, is you can really sculpt with anything. And Trey has come obviously super far, and he's great. But even those ones back then, they were really impressive. And if I can find the pictures, because I used to have them saved somewhere, I probably still do because I'm a bit of a digital pack rat, I will put them up here so everybody can see.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Is that the old dwarves?
Yeah, the old dwarfs from the forum.
I found those originals
Oh, you
not
did?
long ago. Yeah, I was like,
Wow.
I should do something with these, but haven't done it yet.
That'd be fun as a show and tell, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think 4 dwarves, and I had an ogre that had 3 severed dwarf heads hanging from his belt. So it's like a little vignette. You know, the dwarves are out to avenge their 3 buddies who previously got offed by the ogre. So yeah,
That's awesome. I don't think I actually ever saw that one. I only ever saw the dwarves. So, but
I'll have to dig that one out if I can.
Cool.
Post that up somewhere.
All right. Well, so I guess I'm going to kind of just take this through a timeline as far as I know it, and then I'm gonna open it up to maybe you to maybe delve a little deeper into your journey as a sculptor and
Sure.
But yeah, so I met that was my first exposure to you, and obviously a lot of people did. Reaper Ron noticed you, and a lot of people noticed you on there. And you ended up coming to one of the Reaper cons. I don't remember if it was Reaper Con or Artist Con that I first met you at. It was either Reaper Con. It was Reaper Con, so it was Reaper Con 2007 that we probably met for the first time. Yep. And yeah, it was just so cool. And by that time, I think you had started. Had you started doing green stuff by then?
Yeah, by then I was just beginning to experiment with green stuff. I was so comfortable with the Tamiya that I didn't really want to switch right away, but Ron kind of showed me the light as far as the difficulties in mold making with that stuff. And there were a lot of other things. When I first started out, I had no idea what it took to mold a figure and cast it reliably. So the first few pieces that I sent to Ron, I sent as a single piece sculpture. And the Tamiya is really, really difficult to cut. And then on top of that, I was using galvanized steel wire for the armatures, because I like a good stable armature.
Oh, I hear you. I still do.
Yeah. You could not cut that stuff unless you had like a really good razor saw or forget what they call them now. It's a coping saw. Oh well, you had to have a really good saw to cut through those things. And even then, sawing through it sometimes would chip pieces off of it. So Ron basically explained to me that if I was working in Tamiya, it would be much more difficult to produce the figures. So I started messing around with the green stuff.
Awesome. Well, this is a good transition then to my next kind of question is how did you get into sculpting? I mean, I know your first kind of things you did were for Reaper, Rusted Heroes, and I mean, there's been several others. Go ahead and take a minute or two and maybe talk about, maybe where'd you get your first commissions from and how you kind of developed up from there.
Well, the long story is that I was originally keenly interested in being a video game character modeler and designer. And so I've worked with a lot of the old 3D packages, 3D Studio Max, this really obscure package called Wings that was really
I remember Wings.
To use. I'm sorry, not Wings. There was another one before Wings, and I cannot think of the name of it. Wings was actually much easier to use, and that's where I really developed the ability to model low poly count video game models. And so I was on all of the video game development forums, and one in particular that I spent a lot of time at was conceptart.org. And there was a thread in the 2D section called What a Concept. So I go into it, and it was a concept piece for the old Keltos line. And it was beautiful. I loved it. I thought, man, this is awesome. I want to see more of it. So I found the link to the website that the image originated from. It was the keltos.de. So I go there, And lo and behold, there's more concept art there. And there was a link to the manufacturer, who at the time I think was Urban Mammoth.
Mm.
And so I went to the website, and scouring through that, I ran across some pictures of some of the greens that had been sculpted by Kev White. And I just instantly thought, this is fantastic. I'd seen miniatures before. I grew up playing D&D. I owned a few miniatures when I was a kid, and always liked them, but never really had a good use for them because most of the people I gamed with didn't really play with miniatures. So I'd never had any, but when I saw these, I was like, man, those are really, really cool. And so I started Googling Kev's name and eventually found my way to his website where he had some of his works in progress. And that was
a great
really,
page.
yeah, that was really where I got my education from, was looking at how he did what he did. And then eventually I started really just Googling miniatures greens, and I found my way to the Reapers greens page and got to see all the beautiful stuff done by Julie Guthrie, Bob Rodolphe, Bobby Jackson, James Van Schaik, Jason Wiebe, Gene Van Horn, all the people that we know.
Yeah.
It was like I'd stepped into this whole new world, and I immediately put down digital modeling and started working towards sculpting miniatures. And I did it obsessively for about a year. That was in 2004, is right before my son was born. When my son was born, I laid off of it for a little while, and then I started getting back into it little by little, but I wasn't really committed to it as a
My daughter came to say hello.
First time I've seen her. I hear her a lot in the background when we talk, but I hadn't seen her yet. Hey, kiddo.
Say goodnight.
Good night.
See you in the morning.
So, I totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I put down the digital modeling stuff, started working on miniatures, put it down when my son was born, picked it back up about a year later, and wasn't really committed to it as a profession yet. I didn't know that you could really make a living with it. I thought it was something people did as a hobby, and started doing a lot more research on it, found out people did make their living this way. So I thought, well, this is something I'd like to try out. And at the time I was working in construction, did pretty well with that. And I made those dwarf figures that you were talking about. And I took pictures of them with a camera that was just a straight up camera. It had no functionality to really take good pictures of miniatures. And I sent it around all over the place. Actually, I also sculpted a privateer press troll blood, because this is back when Hordes was just beginning, and I saw the picture of I think it was the cover of their first Hordes rule book, and it had the big troll blood on the front, with his arms up roaring, and I was like, I'm going to sculpt this and really impress people. So I sculpted it about 60% of the way and got tired. It's like, well, I'll just take some pictures of it and send it around. And I sent a picture of that to Privateer Press, and somehow Mike McVeigh saw it and emailed me back and said that it looked good, but there were some things I still needed to work on. Obviously, there were, but he said he was impressed and wanted to see me keep it up. So in this time, I'm sending pictures to every single miniatures company that I can think of, and I'm not getting anything back from anybody. And I was ready to put it down and walk away from it. My wife was like, well, maybe it's the pictures. And if you're not going to do anything with the figures, why don't you just send the figures to somebody so they can actually hold it, and maybe that'll change their perspective. So I did. I got those dwarves together, and I got the ogre, and I sent them to Reaper Miniatures. Had no idea who to send them to. I just put them in a box with the address on it, and that was in I think June of 2006, and I got a call from Ron Hawkins, the art director at Reaper, in August of 2006. He was getting ready to leave to go to Gen Con, and he had run across the figures on his desk, and it reminded him that he wanted to get in touch with me. So he called me up, and I'm on the job. I'm packing up for the day, getting ready to go home, and I get this phone call, and he's like, "Hey, this is Ron Hawkins at Reaper Miniatures, and I've got your figures here, and was just wanting to know if you were still interested in sculpting anything." I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So he's like, "Okay, well, I'll get back in touch with you after Gen Con, because right now it's really crazy, and we'll go from there." So I didn't hear from him again till late September, and got my first professional commission late September. That was the two-headed Etten, Nor Ock, I think it is. They've still got it in their Bones line. So I sculpted that one from some concept art, and turned that in pretty quickly, and then got my next commission in, I think it may have been November, and I did an ogre, Kagunk, I think they named him, which he's also in the Bones line. And then just from there, just started getting a commission here and there every month or every other month. And then Ron started being a lot more encouraging with me. He was like, "Hey, just, do some stuff and send it to us. And if we can use it, we will." And that's kind of where it went from there. That was the beginning of it all.
Awesome. And I really love your story of how you kind of broke in, if you will, because so many young artists I see who want to do this or anything, they start submitting, and it's good to submit all the time to get feedback and stuff. Yeah. But sometimes they submit and they get frustrated when they don't get good feedback or aren't commissioned immediately because their work's not ready yet. But what I love about your story is that you did a lot of work and you practiced your butt off before you even sent those off, and you still had to come even farther, and you did, but you worked behind the scenes and got to a point to where people couldn't help but recognize that you were worth giving a chance and giving commissions and stuff. So
I'm really glad they did. Ron definitely put me on the track that I'm on today.
Yes, Ron's awesome.
He is.
Cool. So in all of this, you really have a very distinct style, which is probably my favorite thing about your work. It's over the top muscular barbarians. I mean, you do plenty of other things like that, but that's kind of a real signature of yours. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of your big artistic influences that kind of inform that and make that something you really like to do?
Well, I think the lion's share of my art style came from drawing comic books when I was younger. That was before I wanted to be anything else. I wanted to draw comic books for a living. And I would draw comics, I'd trace comics, and that was really where I learned how anatomy works and, how to define certain muscles and exaggerate others and things like that. And then later getting into video games kind of put a different spin on it because, with video games, there's a lot more exaggeration in proportions and things like that. And then, of course, there's always the ever-present influences from old school fantasy art, all of them. Larry Elmore, Keith Parkinson, Jeff Easley, Gerald Brom, Frank Frazetta, of course. Simon Bisley was a big influence for me.
And obviously Keltos in a way, right? They
exactly
inspired you to.
I think that may have been a thought in the back of my head was, this is kind of Bisley-esque, and I followed that from there. But every time I try to think of who my influences are, I'd start drawing a blank. Sculpturally, Uh, Kev White's always been a really, really big influence for me. I love the way that his sculptures are. There's a lot more gesture, and there, his style is very, very identifiable. You just see it at a glance, and you know whose it is. And I always tried to emulate that, with strong pose, or trying to suggest as much as I can with the silhouette of the figure. And then I get carried away adding little bits and bobs and stuff like that, pouches and daggers, and
Nothing wrong with that.
no, not at all. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, so you, as we've just kind of covered, you've worked for lots of different companies, especially Reaper, obviously. I think There's Rusted Heroes. I'm kind of drawing a blank, but I know there's several others you've done work for. But the big thing that kind of sets you apart from a lot of sculptors in this industry is you decided to kind of go off on your own and do your own thing. I know you still do commissions for other people from time to time, but that's not really what you do now. So, as I mentioned earlier, you have started the company Redbox Games. I can't remember the year that you started that, but it's been quite a while now, I know.
2008.
2008.
August of 2008.
And I'll be sure to put up a link to that. I also have my Redbox game, one of my Redbox game shirts on. They're pretty sweet. Thor.
Exactly. I don't have mine on.
Well, that might look strange if we were wearing the same thing. Anyways, no. But yeah, so what made you decide to start doing your own thing?
Well, like I said, my primary source of income was the construction industry. Even when I was sculpting professionally, most of my income came from construction. And when the housing market, crashed, work got less and less, and the price for what I was doing started to decline, and it just got to the point where there wasn't enough work, and whenever I did get work, it didn't pay quite as well as it should if I actually got the job after bidding on it. So I was getting enough work sculpting that I thought, well, if I work harder at this, then I'll be able to replace my income from construction doing this. I'll be able to be at home with my family and get to do what I love to do. So that was really what I started trying to put all my energy into. And make a long story short, I eventually came to the understanding that the best way to make a living doing it, at least in my opinion at the time, was to work for myself. And that's probably, I've always thought that way in everything. Anything I ever did, I always wanted to be my own boss, work for myself. That's not always a wise decision, but ultimately it can be more fulfilling. At least for me, it was probably just hard-headed. But so I thought, well, if I work at this with the same kind of ambition and work ethic that I put into my construction business, then I can really make something of this. I thought, okay, well, I can sculpt X number of figures a month. And if I sell X number of figures, then I'll make this much income after paying for all the expenses and so on and so forth. So that's what I set out to do. Also, a big part of it was I wanted to do things my way all the time. Mm-hmm. And I have to say this about Reaper. I was always given a lot of freedom to kind of do my thing. I think partly because I wasn't as good at copying concept art as I was doing my own thing, because I tried to do a couple of pieces based on concept art and they didn't work out real well. So I was very much encouraged to do it my way. And so I did. But even doing it my way, there were a lot of subjects I wanted to do that weren't really surefire for a company like Reaper. They kind of needed to follow a certain path with their releases. And I was wanting to do crazy stuff. And to be honest, I still haven't done it. Yeah, I've talked about it a lot, and one day I hope to launch this super duper secret project that I talk about all the time. But ultimately, it was just I didn't have to wait for approvals on anything I was doing. I could come up with an idea and just start sculpting it and sculpt it till I was done, and I had a finished figure. So that was very, very attractive for me, and that's what I went after doing.
Which brings me to my next question. What was kind of the inspiration? What made you decide to go when you launched Redbox, and even to this day is basically it's a fantasy Norse line of figures. What was the inspiration for that? What made you decide to go down that road versus these crazier ideas or traditional fantasy?
I have always liked Vikings, Norse mythology, Norse culture. It's really, really evocative for me. There's a lot to work with. It's really kind of classic in its own way, because I think that I'd say 50% of popular fantasy is based in either Norse mythology or Norse imagery, so it may have just been something that was going to happen one way or the other, whether I wanted it to or not. But I think that it's partly I was good at certain things that seem to always crop up in Norse imagery: fur, muscles, beards, soft armors, things like that. So that was really what I kind of chased after. I've had a lot of other things that I've wanted to do, and I've branched out into different areas of traditional fantasy with like the English miniatures, for example, or the undead. My elves, I really don't really think I've ever had a particular direction I was following with them. So I've kind of, if you look at the elf line of the Redbox games, they're kind of all over the place. They range in period influence from early medieval to late medieval, and so that wasn't as strongly focused as say the Njorn are, which are all Norse as I can make them. But I really enjoy it, and it tends to come pretty easily for me. Whenever I sit down to design a Norse character, there's really a lot of stuff that can be done with them. So I really enjoy it.
Awesome. So back to sculpting questions a little bit.
Sure.
You seem to be a man of many materials. Would you could tell us a few of the materials that you've used over the years, and I know you switch back and forth a lot even. So, but this is just to encourage everybody that you really can sculpt with anything, and it's helpful to try them all, because you might find there's something that you are better with, or you can use in a certain situation.
Yeah. I tend to I switch back and forth based on, sometimes it feels like it's based on my mood. I started with Tamiya, and that was kind of like learning how to play pool with the broomstick. You get the most difficult medium to work with, and you try to get results from it, and it's a good way to force yourself to follow a project from beginning to end in a short period of time, so you see the reward faster. And then I went on to green stuff, where it's much more efficient for the sculpture that we do. Being small, and it needs to be able to be vulcanized, or it needs to withstand the punishment of mold making. It's got a lot of good properties to it, and then it's got some other things about it that I've never really liked, and I've always had trouble overcoming certain things. if you don't have a fresh batch of green stuff, you can get some pushback whenever you're trying to get details into it, or you get little flecks of uncured of unmixed putty in the surface. That's if you have really old green
Yeah,
stuff.
I used to have that all the time. It's terrible.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what was going on.
the first green stuff that I got, I swear that stuff had to be like 5, 6 years old.
Hmm.
Because I could take my knife and stick it into the surface of the yellow and like peel off a chunk of
Yeah.
stuff that was not even sticky, and the yellow is the sticky part. So I went from green stuff to a mix of green and brown together, inspired by Kev White again.
Mhm. Oh, that's right. I forgot he used to do that all the time.
Yeah, he did. And then I went to straight brown stuff, and I really liked that for a little while. And then that got really difficult to come by, so I just changed back to green stuff. And then Procreate came around, so I started using that a lot, and really like that. It's got some strangeness to it. Depending on the temperature of the room and how much moisture you have in your hands when you're working it, it can cure faster or slower. So I had some troubles with that. And Jason Wiebe actually got me started mixing Aves epoxy sculpt with Procreate, and that's almost the perfect medium.
That is a very good mix. I swear by that. If I am not using Fimo or doing a Fimo putty mix, that's really good.
Yeah, it's kind of the best of both worlds there. For a little while, it tends to cure really quick. So
Yeah, it does.
there again, I'm kind of getting back to the Tamiya
Yeah.
habit. And then I tried Cernit chocolate, which actually doesn't look like chocolate. It's more of a red color. And it was awesome to work with. The only thing about working with Cernit that I didn't like was it's very brittle, and you almost have to mold it in resin before you try to vulcanize. You have to have
really?
the resin to vulcanize, because if you vulcanize the Cernit polymer clay, it'll make it through it and you'll get a good mold, but your original will be absolutely destroyed. I had originals that came back to me literally in a bag of about 1 million pieces. Just
Wow.
And I like to keep my originals, so I started looking for other ways and other mediums, and I tried Cernit terracotta, which is a good one. It's not quite as brittle as the chocolate is, but it doesn't have the really rigid wax-like texture that the chocolate does. So it's a little different to work with, and if it heats up, it gets really, really loose, and that's something I've never really liked. I messed around with Fimo a little bit, but never could get the hang of it for that specific purpose. It just, the more you work it, the softer it gets, and before you know it, I'm kind of ham-fisted, believe it or not. So I need something that has a little bit of pushback to it, so I don't just absolutely murder whatever it is I'm working on. And I've messed around a little bit with digital modeling as well. I've been working all week on a digital model, and I'm happy with the results, but it's just taking too long to do it. And I like to finish a figure by the end of the day. If I start in the morning, I want to be done by the evening.
Yeah. So one of my other questions was, I don't know if you're the fastest sculptor I've ever met, but you are very fast. What is I don't know, can you give us a number, like of the most you've done in a easily gauged amount of time? You like one a day. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I can do, depending on the composition of the figure, I can do 2, maybe 3 figures a day if I'm not sculpting the hands and the faces. The hands and the faces, I always try to take my time on, and most of the time, if I sculpt a face, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get it the way I want it. And hands are a punishment It never ends. I'm always resculpting hands. They're either too big, or the fingers look like sausages, or they're all out of whack. And
Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you on that. I'm feeling a lot more comfortable than these days, but yeah, they're always the last thing to do.
Yeah, hands are a pain. So I can sculpt, or I have sculpted 3 figures in a day, and been happy with the results until the next day. And the next day I look at them and I think, oh, I should have taken my time and done this differently or done that differently. I'll just start over. So.
Do you think that's because they really aren't that great, or is it more just artists coming back and catching little things here and there?
I think it's more that I'm just obsessive or neurotic or both. I don't know if there's a difference between the two, but no, I've here lately, maybe for the past year or so, and you and I have talked about this a lot. I will sculpt a figure to the 90% finished point, and I'll just look at it and think, this is terrible. And I'll toss it in a box and I'll start all over again and do the exact same figure.
You ever go back to the ones in the box, or is it gone?
No, they're all in the box, and I still have them.
I mean, do you ever reclaim it to do something else with, or no? I have them as a reminder.
Yeah, I've never. I can't make myself throw them away if they're almost finished. I have to keep them, even if they're. Usually, the problem is they're either a little too small or they're a little too big. If they're the exact size that I want them to be, even if the sculpting is not exactly the way I want it to be, I will still keep the figure and probably do something with it. Gotcha. Mostly because I obsess so much over everything being the appropriate size for what it's intended to be within the line. I've made some mistakes here and there where some figures are noticeably smaller or larger than others. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it isn't. My biggest pet peeve is large heads on figures. So if I'm sculpting a figure and I get up to the point where I'm going to sculpt the head, and I start sculpting the head at the size it needs to be, if it's larger than it should be compared to the body, then it's a bust. So I just get rid of that. Or if it's smaller than it should be compared to the body, that's also a bust. So it's a frustrating obsession to have, to say the least.
But obviously you're getting mileage and you're improving with every one. Along that question about you doing 3 a day, what material were you typically using? Was that with every material you used, or is there material you prefer to work in when you're going at that speed?
And Aves.
Procreate and Aves.
60-40. 60% Aves, 40% Procreate.
Well, a lot more Aves.
Yeah. Well, the Aves makes it much easier to push around at the very beginning, so I can cover an entire figure really, really quickly and start getting the details into it, the basic shapes, and then everything else is just smaller layers that I put onto it before it cures. It's still soft enough that I can attach things and I can make the adjustments that need to be made, but it's rigid enough, or the underlayer is rigid enough that it doesn't deform when I add the new layer on top of it. So that's part of the reason why I'm able to move so much more quickly.
I knew it had to be that you weren't letting it cure. There's just no, if you take time to let your figure cure and you're using putty, there's no way you can do it that fast. So that's very interesting to hear, because I mean, a lot of sculptors use that similar technique where you will get a base going and then you keep adding on, but you usually have to be very careful, especially with things like green stuff or even Procreate, because it doesn't set up quite as hard. But so you found, though, that doing this mix with the Aves, because it sets up a little quicker, and that mix would cure harder because of the Aves, that it allows you to have that firmness, but like you said, still move around. That's really cool. I'm not sure I ever really talked to you about that until now. That's really interesting.
Well, that's a new subject we can explore.
Yeah. Well, which brings me to my last question on sculpting. If you could just give a quick overview about the about your process from starting to figure to end?
Okay. Well, I have a handy dandy little card that I got from Patrick Keith that
Oh
has
yeah, he's got great resources.
yes, it is. And I think Patrick has me beaten for the fastest sculptor.
Yeah, I think he probably does. He's insane.
Still get great quality too.
Yep.
Yeah. I look at him and I just think, ah. But so I've got the little card that has the skeletal diagram on it. It shows you exactly, how big something is or how long the limbs are for the scale. And I have 20 gauge, I think it's 10 annealed copper wire. You can get it from Hobby Lobby. And I have 3 lengths. I have 1 length for the legs. I have 1 length for the spine. And I have 1 length for the arms. I solder those together. Put the bends in where the joints are going to be. Pose the armature into the pose that I want the figure to have. And then I take a really, really thin skin of putty and I coat all of the limbs so that I don't let that sit. All of that is for is to make it easier whenever I start to apply the bulk to the armature. But I don't have to chase it around the wire to make it stick. It sticks to the putty that's
You don't let it set at all. You get it on there and then you go to right into bulking, and whatever has cured by that time is cured, but you're not like letting it fully set up.
It won't cure at all.
I got you.
This process takes place within a 15-minute window.
Okay.
Once I have the armature posed, it's bulked up within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then I'll let that sit, and it typically with Aves and Procreate mixture, that typically takes about maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours to set. And in that time, I'm bulking up other armatures. So I'll have typically 5 to 8 armatures bulked up on my desk at any given time.
What do you mean by bulked up?
Bulked up is it's not the full girth and thickness of the anatomy, but it's close to it.
Gotcha.
So if you could imagine
forming the shapes and things like that, but
all the shapes are there, but they're not refined and they're not the full girth.
Mm-hmm.
To repeat myself, sorry. They're not the full girth that they will be whenever I'm done. I like to work with kind of thick layers of putty because I don't like to run into the armature as I'm working. And if the layer is too thin, you'll find yourself hitting that armature pretty often. And it really kind of makes it difficult to get the shape you want to have. So basically the bulked up armature before I begin adding the final layers would be about 2/3 of the final thickness that the actual figure is going to be. And mainly the only reason I bulk it up that thick is because I want to move very quickly from point A to point B. So having that thickness already there kind of establishes the overall shape, and then I can just, add the layers and work into it as I need to. But as far as all the curves, all the joins where the muscles interact, that's pretty much all there. All the knobby joints like the shoulder joint, the kneecap, the elbows. Sometimes I do the wrists, the rib cage, of course, the hips. All that is already there. So it's fairly. When you look at it, it's not a skeleton; it's a muscular figure.
I'll try and find. I know you've posted several pictures of it. I'm going to try and overlay them as we're talking in the final edit of this. So hopefully people can get a better idea.
Actually, I keep meaning to post some work in progress to my Facebook and just keep forgetting to do it. I keep forgetting.
You're too busy sculpting 3 figures a day.
Yeah. I've probably sculpted 30 or 40 figures in the past month that I haven't finished any of them. They range from 75% finished to 90% finished, and they're just kind of sitting in a box. So, but for good reason. I'm trying to I'm trying to sculpt for plastic now, so I have to make certain changes in the way that I do what I do, and I have to be aware of the differences in how the plastic molding process is done. Less undercut for one. So, and that's a really hard one to get used to being conscious of all the time. So, there is a point to me being as crazy as I am.
Well, that sounds like an awesome segue into the last question is, so you mentioned working on plastic stuff. What's next for Redbox Games or Trey Manor, or what do you have going on?
Hopefully I will be able to launch a plastic starter set for my Norse faction. It's really kind of an experiment with the process and the market. I want to know if people really want me to move in this direction, or if they want me to stick with metal. I'm fine with either one, but I've been doing metal for a long time, and I've had a lot of people say they want the opportunity to get my stuff in plastic. So I'd like to explore it and see if I can make a go with it. I've done a lot of research into the various works of how the manufacturers do what they do, what they charge for their services, how long it takes for things to be done, what are the hang-ups that you kind of have to watch out for in the design phase before you even get to the sorry, my dogs are freaking out. All the behind the scenes things. I mean, you and I have talked about this for years. The various ways that things have to be done and what you need to watch out for here, and how long things take to move through the production pipeline. And then of course there's the shipping and the packaging and all these various things. So sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. But the next thing for me is a starter box of Neorn Warriors. The exact contents of the box I'm still kind of working out, but it's mostly going to be semi-modular lower level foot soldiers for a Norse warband. So you'll have three archers and hopefully 12 semi-modular footmen. And they'll have universally interchangeable weapon hands, universally interchangeable heads. The shields will be a part with the body, so you won't have to worry about adding that too. It's not going to be in hard plastic. It'll be in the higher grade hard PVC, but not high impact polystyrene. So I've done a lot of looking at the various differences between products made in the polystyrene and products made in the PVC. And for my sculpting style, I think that the PVC is a better fit because the details just seem a little bit sharper. There's not as, you don't have to have zero drag on the undercuts. You can have a little bit of an undercut. So it allows me a little bit more freedom in the design phase. The pieces don't have to be cut into quite as many different parts. So that also helps in the design. So I'm hoping that people will enjoy what I've got coming. And if this goes well, then I will move on from the Norse faction into the various other factions that I have. Maybe not in the same Kickstarter, but shortly thereafter, I would hope. The first Kickstarter is really just to test the process, establish a relationship with one of the manufacturers, and get a product delivered to people so they can see what my figures are going to look like in plastic. And if they really like it, then I'll come back and I'll do something different. Hopefully they'll enjoy that as well.
My vote is for Boneback Goblins for the second group.
Yeah.
I know you have plenty that you can choose from.
Well, yeah, but
the personal
the
favorite.
Bonebacks that was really the first thing that somebody asked me to do in plastic. uh, I can't remember the guy's name. Actually, I do, but I don't want to say it just in case I want to embarrass the guy. But he said he was like, are you ever going to do the bone backs in plastic? And I was like, well, I'd like to, but I never really thought about it. Like, man, if you do the bone backs in plastic, I'm going to buy a ton of them. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll see if we can make that happen. But yeah, the bone backs were a special favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I like the little runty goblins, little shifty guys that are, shooting bows and arrows from the shadows and poking you as you walk through the trail. But there's just something about a big, mean, muscular, huge gut goblin with a gigantic spiked club over his head. I really like that. So
Yes.
hopefully other people will too, and we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. Well, I will keep in touch with you on this, and this video won't go up for
Sorry.
no problem. The video won't go up for another couple weeks, but in that time, if I have more news, I'll add it into this feed so people can know where to go.
I'm sorry, Tom, I couldn't hear you. Say that again.
Oh, I said I'll keep in touch with you, and if this video won't go up for probably a couple weeks, but if there's any change on the project, I'll make sure and link to it here so everybody can find that.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll update it even past that, so hopefully people will find it if they're watching this, like, I don't know, several months from now. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? That is, I've gone through all of the questions I have for you, and I've really enjoyed the interview.
Just that I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and
absolutely, man.
Thank you for all the encouragement you've given me over the years, and just for being a good friend, man.
Absolutely. Well, same to you, man. Inspiration, and it's always good to be able to talk to fellow sculptors, and it really inspires us. And that's what this channel is about. It's a chance for everybody to come together and learn and discuss and keep sculpting.
Yeah,
I fit my tagline in there just then. So
I wish something like this had been around when I first got started.
Oh my gosh, yes, that would have been helpful.
Well, I hope that this has been helpful for anybody that's starting out. And, I'm always open to answering questions. If anybody wants to ask me anything specifically, you can find me on Facebook at my Redbox Games Facebook page. That's typically the best way to get in touch with me. Not through the messages, though. For some reason, I miss my messages on there all the time. But, if somebody posts to the wall, I try to be really, really on top of that. So, and I want to encourage young artists as much as I possibly can. It's a dream come true working in the industry and doing what I do. And I'd love to try to get as many people doing it as people want to. Yeah. I just, it's a lot of fun.
It sure is. All right, Trey. Well, thank you so much again.
All right, Tom.
And yeah, that's all for now.
Thanks.
Yep.
See y'all later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed interviewing Trey. There's a lot of great information there, and Trey does amazing figures. His barbarians are so cool, and they inspire me all the time. I hope they'll inspire you to sculpt, and yeah, go ahead and support him too. Head on over to his store and pick up a couple figures. Now, I wanted to give you guys a quick preview on some of the next stuff that I'm going to be doing. So, real quick, just a quick peek. This is what I'm messing with right now. I picked up Warm Request Silver Tower. Super excited about this. This Warm Request was one of my all-time favorite games. I unfortunately sold my copy, but I still have the old one. I have a lot of the miniatures, and I just love it. But yeah, I've been working on putting together a lot of the minis here. They're outstanding. And this one here, the Night Quester I'm working on, I'm going to use for an upcoming video. So I decided I wanted to change a little bit on him. So I'm going to record that, and it'll be a great video on showing you guys how to use putty, which is what people at Patreon have been requesting a little more of. So anyways, thanks again for watching, and special thanks to all my patrons. Head on over there to patreon.com. There's a link in the corner here, I think. And you can check it out, support the channel, help me keep making these videos. All right, really appreciate you watching it, and don't forget to keep sculpting.